One of my subscribers, Alan Paul, who is a former Scout helicopter pilot who served in the Falklands from June 1982 to January 1983, helping to clear up the islands of Argentine ordnance, posted me an interesting object from captured Argentine ration packs. So let's open it and see what it is. So this is a box of matches used by Argentine troops on the Falklands, part of a set showing various warships of the Argentine Navy, in this case the most famous of all Argentine warships that took part in the Falklands War, the light cruiser General Belgrano. 2nd of May 1982, a small task group of warships patrols south of the Falkland Islands, that collection of lonely windswept British possessions 400 miles off the coast of Argentina in the cold South Atlantic. The task group is one of 3 concentrations of Argentine ships closing around the Falklands, which had been occupied by Argentine forces on the 2nd of April 1982 following a brief battle with the small British garrison. A state of war has existed between the two nations for a month, but the large British task force dispatched by Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher to recapture the Falklands and South Georgia is rapidly closing on the islands after steaming 8,000 miles from the UK. The Argentines have begun operations to reinforce Las Malvinas, as they call the Falklands, with the Navy dispatched to try and deal with the approaching British threat. To the north is Task Group 79.1, consisting of Argentina's single aircraft carrier, the 25 de Mayo, or 30th of May, an upgraded World War II-era carrier originally called HMS Venerable, escorted by 2 modern British-built Type 42 destroyers, and Task Group 79.2, consisting of 3 French-built corvettes. While to the south is Task Group 79.3, led by the light cruiser General Belgrano, a former World War II U.S. Navy warship once called the USS Phoenix, and her escort, 2 World War II-era U.S. Navy destroyers, the ARA Piedra Bueno and the Hipólito Bouchard. The southern task group is steaming into trouble. On the 12th of April 1982, the British had declared a 200 nautical mile maritime exclusion zone around the Falkland Islands, warning that any Argentine warship or naval auxiliary that entered it would face attack if it was deemed to pose a threat to British forces. On the 30th of April, this zone had been upgraded to a total exclusion zone. Any sea vessel or aircraft from Argentina or any other country entering the zone would be fired on without warning. The Argentines ignored the total exclusion zone, the TEZ, and continued to reinforce the islands. The 3 Argentine naval task groups, however, remained just outside the TEZ, although aircraft were launched from the carrier searching for the British task force. On the 30th of April, Task Group 79.3 was detected by HMS Conqueror, British nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarine, which began to shadow the General Belgrano and her escorts, constantly reporting on the Argentine position to London. On the 1st of May, Argentine Naval Command ordered all its task groups to search out and destroy the Royal Navy Task Force. The great fear for the British was the loss or damage of one of the 2 aircraft carriers forming the basis of the task force, HMS Invincible and Hermes. If either was put out of action, it would be extremely difficult for the British, with its small number of Sea Harriers, to establish air superiority over the Falklands, which was vital for the projected amphibious landing of 3 Commando Brigade to follow. The carriers and their precious aircraft could not be risked. The Argentine order to attack the task force was passed to British naval headquarters at Northwood in the UK. The following day, a meeting was convened at Chequers, the Prime Minister's official country residence, and Mrs. Thatcher was presented with a demand from the Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Terence Lewin, that immediate action must be taken against the Argentine naval threat developing rapidly north and south of the Falklands. On the 1st of May also, the first British attacks were made on Argentine positions on the Falklands, including the first RAF Vulcan Black Buck bombing raid on Port Stanley Airfield, and low-level attacks by Harriers flying off the carriers, and also naval bombardment by British warships. The Argentines' naval plan now envisioned a pincer attack by the 2 task groups to the north and 1 to the south of the Falklands, with the British task force laying off the east coast of the Falkland Islands. Task Group 79.3, containing the Belgrano, was to use its French-supplied MBDA Exocet anti-shipping missiles to engage British ships, which would then be finished off by the General Belgrano's 6-inch main guns. A Brooklyn-class light cruiser, Belgrano had entered U.S. Navy service in 1938. In December 1941, as the USS Phoenix, she had been present in Pearl Harbor during the famous Japanese attack, but escaped any real damage. At full load, the vessel displaced 12,242 tons, was just over 600 feet long, and had a maximum speed of 32.5 knots. In 1951, the Phoenix was sold to Argentina, becoming the General Belgrano, and her complement in 1982 was 1,138 men, and her armament consisted of 15 6-inch 47 caliber Mark 16 naval guns, and in theory she was capable of firing 10 rounds a minute out of each barrel, therefore able to deluge a target with 150 6-inch shells per minute. The guns were arranged in 5 3-barrel turrets. The 6-inch gun's maximum range was 26,100 yards, or almost 24 kilometers. Secondary armament were 8 5-inch 25 caliber guns, used as anti-aircraft weapons, plus 40 and 20 mm anti-aircraft guns, and 2 British Seacat anti-aircraft missile systems that had been installed in 1968. The General Belgrano was also fitted with an air complement consisting of 2 Aerospatiale Alouette 3 helicopters, but only one was aboard in 1982. By way of comparison, we can compare the General Belgrano against a typical British World War II light cruiser, HMS Belfast, preserved today on the River Thames. Of a similar vintage, Belfast didn't, of course, serve in the Falklands War, having been turned into a museum ship in 1971. However, Belfast has a fully loaded displacement of 14,900 tons, making her over 2,000 tons heavier than the Belgrano, and is 613 feet in length, a shade longer than the Belgrano. Her main armament is 12 6-inch Mark 23 guns, with a maximum range of just over 23 kilometers, very comparable to the General Belgrano. The Belgrano, however, is more heavily armed, with an extra 3 6-inch guns. I'm going to suggest that the Belfast would probably have been rather useful in the Falklands War for shore bombardment work, its main guns bigger than the 4.5-inch guns in use aboard the Royal Navy's destroyers and frigates during the conflict. Compared to modern ships, the General Belgrano was heavily armoured. Her main belt was 5.5 inches or 140 millimeters thick. If the General Belgrano had got close enough to engage British warships with her main guns, it was a justified fear that she could have caused havoc amongst the task force, using her old 6-inch guns, not to mention the Fiat Exocets carried by her escorts. The Royal Navy wanted the General Belgrano sunk before she came in range of the task force. So though the General Belgrano was steaming just outside the TEZ, Thatcher gave permission for her to be attacked, a decision that at the time and afterwards has generated a great deal of controversy in both nations. The British had, in fact, 5 nuclear-powered submarines operating as a screen for the task force: HMS Conqueror, Courageous, Valiant, Spartan, and Splendid. Conqueror had entered service in 1971, and in 1982 was under the command of Commander Chris Refford-Brown, and had departed the Clyde Naval Base in Scotland on the 4th of April. On the 19th of April, Conqueror had landed a party from the Special Boat Service, the SBS, on South Georgia during Operation Parakeet to recapture the other British colonies seized by the Argentines, then had arrived in the vicinity of the Falklands on the 30th of April. Keeping the Argentine Task Group 79.3 under close watch, Refford-Brown received orders to sink the General Belgrano on the 2nd of May. Belgrano was also chosen for destruction because the British were unsure of the exact location of Task Group 79.1, containing the single Argentine aircraft carrier. At 4 p.m., Conqueror was positioned to make an attack. Refford-Brown had a choice of 2 types of torpedo: the modern Mark 24 Tigerfish guided torpedo, or the World War II era Mark 8, an unguided type. He chose the latter for 2 reasons: concern that the modern Type 24's guidance system might malfunction, and of course the fact that the old World War II torpedoes, due to the 805-pound Torpex-filled warhead, were designed to penetrate the thick armoured belts of World War II-era warships, just like the General Belgrano. Around 4 p.m., Conqueror fired a pattern of 3 Mark 8 torpedoes from a distance of about 1.5 kilometers. The Argentine crews of the 3 ships were not aware of Conqueror's presence or of the torpedoes hammering towards them. Torpedo number 1 struck the General Belgrano in the region of the aft engine rooms, just beyond the edge of the thick side armour, punching through the hull. Then the warhead exploded inside the cruiser, knocking out electrical power and smashing the emergency electrical generator. A fireball shot through the various decks, and the explosion blew a 20-meter wide hole in the deck. Seconds later, torpedo number 2 struck the Belgrano's bow between turret 1 and the capstan, blowing off the ship's bow. The 2 torpedoes killed about 272 members of the crew. Torpedo number 3 ran on for some distance and exploded near the hull of the destroyer Hipólito Bochart, but did no damage. Aboard the General Belgrano, the crews struggled to cope with the damage. Pumps weren't working due to the electrical system failing. Fires were spreading inside the ship. Huge numbers of the crew were injured, overwhelming the infirmary. Life rafts were deployed, secured to the ship's side until needed. The sea state was bad, causing the Belgrano's captain, Hector Bonzo, to postpone abandoning ship. But by 4:23 p.m. the cruiser had taken on a 20-degree list to port, so he gave the order to abandon ship. 19 minutes later, the surviving crew were all in life rafts, and Bonzo was the last off the ship. By 4:50 p.m. the General Belgrano's list had reached 60 degrees, and 10 minutes later she slid beneath the waves of the South Atlantic. The 2 Argentine destroyers, some way off and in bad weather, initially failed to realize that the Belgrano had been sunk, but eventually they realized what was going on and began rescue efforts. A large-scale search and rescue effort was now initiated by the Argentine Navy to locate survivors in stormy conditions. 2 Argentine P-2 Neptune aircraft joined in the search. Around 1 p.m. on the 3rd of May, a large concentration of life rafts was found. The survivors were in a bad way due to exposure, frostbite, and injuries from the sinking, and some were dead. Rescue operations continued until the 9th of May 1982 before they were called off. In total, Argentine ships rescued 770 living survivors, and a further 23 dead bodies were also recovered. 3 of them recovered from the ocean by a Soviet fishing vessel. In total, 323 crew from the General Belgrano were confirmed dead. The results of the sinking were to harden Argentina against British peace and ceasefire proposals. It also had the effect the Royal Navy had desired. It ended Argentina's attempted naval pincer move against the task force, and most of the fleet, except one diesel-electric submarine, returned to port and safety. Thatcher's decision to sink the Belgrano remains controversial. The vessel was outside the TEZ, and Argentina argued initially that its sinking was a war crime. However, due to the very real threat posed to the British task force by the vessel, her sinking has been argued by many to have been an operational necessity. Britain, after all, was at war with a nation that had attacked and occupied its sovereign territory. The gloves were off. Some Argentine officers admitted that they thought the British action was legal because of a British declaration on the 23rd of April 1982 regarding the TEZ that said that from then on any Argentine vessel would be attacked if it came in range of British forces, whether it was in the TEZ or not. Rear Admiral Sandy Woodward, the task force commander, justified the sinking of the General Belgrano by arguing that the British could not allow an Argentine warship to remain near the exclusion zone and potentially launch an attack from that position. In 1994, the Argentine government recognized the sinking of the General Belgrano as a legitimate act of war, and several of their senior retired naval officers of the period also confirmed this position in letters to newspapers or in interviews. For the crew of HMS Conqueror, they had achieved an historical kill, the only time thus far when a nuclear-powered submarine has successfully torpedoed an enemy warship. On returning to Faslane, the Conqueror raised the Jolly Roger, the black flag with a white skull and 2 cross torpedoes, a Royal Navy tradition dating back to World War I, to show that a submarine was returning from a war patrol victorious. HMS Conqueror was decommissioned in 1990 and she still exists. Most of the old nuclear-powered boats are kept in docks at Rosyth in Scotland and Devonport in Devon, awaiting disposal. Some 20 such boats are like this, stripped of fixtures and fittings, and the estimated cost of fully disposing of each submarine is an astounding £96 million. So in 2025, the Royal Navy has more submarines in storage, 20, than serving with the fleet, a grand total of just 9, a ludicrous and shameful situation created by successive defence cuts and government mismanagement of the armed forces. To add some perspective, at the time of the Falklands War in 1982, the Royal Navy had 32 commissioned submarines, both nuclear-powered and diesel-electric. I suspect that if things keep going the way they are, our only memory of our once great Navy may be on the covers of matchboxes as well. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.